Buster, before I ask you about the NL West and 2014 Padres, I need to ask you what it was like to cover the Padres back in the day for the San Diego Union from 1990 to 1994.
I had a great time. People always ask you about, is it more fun covering a team that's winning? And I never really cared. I just enjoyed teams where the players played hard and they were invested. And my goodness, the first year I covered the Padres, they had Trevor Hoffman. They traded for him that summer in '93. They trade for Brad Ausmus, the fire sale summer. And it's amazing, and I was just talking to Phil Plantier about this, how many of those guys are now in positions of authority. Right. To see Brad managing the Tigers, to see Brooke Hale having been a pitching coach, see Trevor Hoffman in a position of authority here. It's pretty cool, and it says a lot about that group.
So you covered the team the year that Tony Gwynn hit .394. Did you think if there hadn't been a baseball strike, do you think he would have hit 400?
No question about it. On that last road trip, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, I think he went 15 for 21. They went through Chicago and Houston. 15 for 25 in that last road trip. He got up to 394, and I remember Tony telling me he had a special bat. He called it the 7 grains of pain. He only used it against breaking ball pitchers. And he said that if I'm close, and he was zooming toward 400, he said he was going to use that bat against everybody. And the previous seasons, he'd actually had some knee trouble at the end of the year. That year, he was healthy. He was hitting great. I'll always be convinced he would have hit 400 that year.
So you had Tony Gwynn, but you had some good teams. You had some bad teams. You had the 92. You had the four tops. With Tony Gwynn and Tony Fernandez and Fred McGriff and Gary Sheffield. How about the characters of the different guys that you covered during your time here?
I actually didn't do that much with the 92 team. I became like a full-time beat writer 93 and 94. So I had Sheffield right at the end. He was very unhappy about the situation that year and the uncertainty about whether or not he'd be traded. I love the character of those guys. To have Bruce Bochy, as a third base coach on those teams, and to have Rob Piccolo be a coach on that team. Merv Retman was the hitting coach. He was a great staff. Jim Riggleman, the manager. And I ran through the guys on the team. I'll bump into those guys all the time going around baseball. And I just loved that group of players because I thought they were such good people.
What did you miss? Did you miss anything about Yuma?
It's funny. I'm like the only person in the world who likes Yuma.
Really?
Because I grew up in a town of 400 people in Vermont, and so everyone would talk about how isolated Yuma was. And I'm like, this is a metropolis. They have traffic lights. And I remember the place that we rented when I was working at the San Diego Union Tribune was way out in the desert, and I loved it. But all the players would always complain about it because they had nothing to do.
Your favorite memory of the great Jerry Coleman?
I just was lucky to be around him on a daily basis, and we got to be friends. I kept in touch with him after I left San Diego. And the thing that I always tell people is that Jerry was so humble, and he was known on air as being really nice, but I loved to get his unvarnished opinions because he had them. Especially when if he saw a middle infielder who wasn't playing fundamentally, boy, he would tell you about that. And I loved hearing his stories because you'd ask him about, Joe DiMaggio, and you'd ask him about Yogi Berra, and you'd ask him about Mickey Mantle and all those guys, and he had such specific memory. It was so great to be around someone who was so anecdotal that way. And it was always neat for me how he downplayed his military service. It really said a lot about him that when anybody would say, thank you for, being a hero, he would say, no, the heroes are the ones who didn't come back.
Your thoughts on the 2014 Padres? I know a lot of people had high hopes for this team, but now some setbacks with Josh Johnson, Corey Lupke out for the year, Carlos Quentin's knee injury. They'll get Cam Maben at some point. What are your expectations for this team this season?
Marty, going to spring training, I was going to pick them to make the playoffs, but then Lupke went down, Josh Johnson went down, so when I made my picks, I didn't put them in. But I think they're a really interesting team because they remind me a lot of Oakland in 2013. They don't really have any stars. But they have a lot of really good players. And certain guys who hit really well against lefties, certain guys who hit really well against righties. They bolstered their bullpen. Benoit is a guy who's going to help them a lot. I think Tyson Ross is ready to go the next level. So if I were to line up all the National League teams, like 1 through 15, to me, they're like in that 6-7 range. And I think if the Dodgers have problems where, a Kershaw gets hurt for an extended period, a Hanley Ramirez gets hurt for an extended period, I could see the Padres being interesting.
Where do you see their strength?
With their offense. It's interesting.
Really? I'm very surprised. I thought you would say pitching, like, with Cashner, Tyson Ross.
I think that generally it's their strength is the overall depth of the team. Okay. This is what was great about Oakland last year is they had 25 guys, and there weren't really 5 guys you could say, boy, they stink. They're bad players. The Padres are like that. They have a lot of guys who are pretty good players. But I think their offense, I mean, last year they only had one guy who had won more than 500 plate appearances, and Chase Headley. The biogenesis suspension's hurt. The injury to Yonder Alonso clearly hurt. If they can keep those guys in the field, and I know that's been the great if about the Padres, they could be interesting.
Okay, I have not seen your official pick, but I'm going to guess it's going to be the team that's right behind us right now for the NL West. Is that right?
No, well, no question. And you know, and I covered the Yankees for 4 years, and it's a blessing and a curse to have a high payroll, because on one hand, the expectation is they're going to win, $236 million payroll. But on the other hand, the depth of the franchise is tremendous. I mean, their bullpen is so deep. They've got the 4-star outfielders. If they have a problem in midseason, we know they'll go out and they'll get a star. For example, if they needed starting pitching, they'll probably be the team to add Cliff Lee. And that's something the other teams in the division don't have.
Can't let you go without asking you what it was like to work at the San Diego Union with the likes of the Nick Canepa, Jay Posner, Bill Center, guys like Ed Graney, guys like that.
Well, to be clear, I was at the San Diego Union, okay? Those Nick Canepa, Jay Posner, Kirk Kenney, those guys were all at the Tribune. And when we first started working together, there's no question it was like a rivalry. And we were looking sort of sideways at those guys, not sure whether to trust them. When I did radio earlier today, someone mentioned it was like the scene from Anchorman with the two sets, and that's the way it was. You had nerdy sports writers sort of staring each other down, now teammates. I had a great time. And you know, it's neat. I became really good friends with those guys working with them.
Buster, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mark.